stands for Council of Neighbors and Organizations, so it's easier to say KONO. If you haven't heard of us, we are an umbrella nonprofit organization that empowers neighborhoods. So we work with neighborhood associations, HOAs, like you guys, special improvement districts, things like that. So if you haven't heard of us, I have some information on the table over by the whiteboard for some upcoming programs and workshops, and we provide dumpsters for cleanups in neighborhoods, and we also really focus on education. And so this is a good example of what we really like to promote is informing residents and making sure that you have a voice around the table when it's affecting your neighborhood. So we don't necessarily advocate for your issue and take it to City Council, but we give you the tools on how to do that. And we also advocate for good public process, so public participation, and that's exactly what we're trying to do tonight. So before I introduce some of the speakers, I wanted to just do a couple housekeeping things. Restrooms are straight out here and to the left. Make sure you sign in because there's going to be future meetings like this. This is just the first one, but there will be a few more, so make sure you're on the email list so we can invite you to those future meetings. And I'm going to go over a few ground rules, and it might be silly, it might seem silly, but it tends to get passionate when we talk about your homes and your neighborhoods. So we want to make sure we're all being very respectful. I know you probably can't maybe see that in the back, but number 6 is almost the most important. Try to be respectful. We will open it up to questions at the end, so hold your questions to the end, but when you do have a question, let's try to be respectful. Also, everyone participates, no one dominates. If you do have a comment, that's great to hear your comment, but let's keep it quick and short so we can move on to the next person. Don't interrupt, try to raise your hand again. Let's take turns, be adults. And then keep an open mind. We want to make sure everyone's opinion is heard and valued as well. And then we're going to try to stick to the agenda, which is really to talk about some options ahead for your neighborhood. And it's okay to disagree, just try not to be disagreeable. So again, if we all can agree to this, we'll stick to this and bring it back to these ground rules if it gets a little passionate. So again, we're going to do a brief presentation, talk about some options that you have on your paper there, and take questions at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our councilman in this district, Councilman David Geislinger.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you all for coming. First, I've got to give kudos to Ted over here. Ted Strovac is our communications director or administrator at City Hall, and he has been pushing this at my request for a really long time. To have this kind of turnout really reflects very well on him. So thank you, Ted. You can talk to him afterwards. Please don't mention his footwear because you'll be guilty of sexual harassment. I want to introduce to you Dick Dubois. Dick is right here. Dick has been the president of the SIMD for 20 years. And for about 19 and a half years, you've been trying to get this together so we could get something done. Dick came to me last year. We were 24 days into my term. And I was advised of what are some really systemic issues that need to be addressed in your SIMD that we're going to get into. There was a lot of interest at that point in time. I was getting lots of emails from people who were saying that we're not watering the grass, which was true. And so we decided to schedule a town hall for July. And we were all set up, and much of the town hall is going to be presented today. The same thing. Between the time we scheduled the town hall in July, do you guys remember it was like Noah's rain? And so we had tons and tons and tons of rain. By the time we got there, all the grass problems had been resolved because Mother Nature had decided to take care of the inability to pay for irrigation. We had 3 people show up. Since last July, I have been working very hard on this. I have been meeting with the city attorney. I've been meeting with lots of other folks. Today we're going to talk about what the results of those meetings are, and we're not going to be able to get to resolution today. And we're not going to be able to get to resolution, I don't think. I'd be stunned, utterly stunned, if we get to resolution by the end of this year. By that I mean by December of 2018. My hope is that we have some resolution in place by the end of the year, December 2019. And so that's what I'm thinking is our realistic time frame. And so I'd ask you to just kind of hold your expectations down just a little bit. I need to tell you a couple of other things. I am not a member of your SIMD. I don't have a vested interest in what ultimately gets decided other than I am the city council representative for District 2, and this is the most vexing problem within District 2 that needs to get addressed. So I will be present, I will be working with you, I will be representing what you all want to do, but ultimately what gets decided is going to be people who are inside of the SIMD. And if you have the handout, if you look on the back side, that essentially says what the geographical boundaries of the SIMD are. So if you are within that geographical boundary, you are in the right place. If you're not in that geographical boundary, I hope you enjoy what we're going to talk about, but you, like me, are not a member of the SIMD. And the SIMD is kind of a district. It's an entity where the people inside get to address what is being done with that. In that regard, Vic has been the person who has been struggling to get community engagement for a long time, and for that, I credit him very well. That said, I want to take it a step further. There's a difference in colors, if you'll notice. Depending on who you are may depend on what color you live in. And let me explain that. The SIMD paradigm, if you would, was something that was established in the late 1980s, and it was designed to fund various areas of development around town. There are 4 other SIMDs out there. And I want you to picture the geographical boundary as a piece of orange cheese, American cheese. Every single one of the SIMDs is comprised of a piece of American cheese. How an SIMD is funded is by a piece of white cheese. Every other SIMD is a piece of Munster that is cut and overlaps the piece of American tremendously, absolutely accurately. For reasons that we haven't been able to figure out, what happened is your SIMD became funded by a piece of Swiss cheese. And some of those people, the folks in the yellow on the map, they are excluded from the funding mechanism of the SIMD. That's the underlying structural issue that is addressing your SIMD that is unique anywhere within the city. And that's what we're going to be trying to address today and in the coming months. I would say how it happened may be a great academic question. I don't think we can blame, or blaming people for what happened 20 or 25 years ago makes no difference. It's just the situation of where we are, and since it's where we are, the question is what are we going to do about it? It's going to be hard, and it's going to take time over the course of the coming year. And with this, before I introduce the last people, I want to share something with you about what I've learned in the last year and a half on council. If it's a choice between easy and hard, you pick the easy. If it's a choice between right and wrong, you pick right. And that's easy. What we are facing here is hard. It's going to be really hard. And the alternatives are not going to be good one way or the other for some people or the other. This is where politics gets messy, it gets hard, And it requires us to enter into, to make a choice between things that are going to be difficult or things that are going to be more difficult. There is not an easy answer to this question. If you want an easy answer, I've spent a year plus trying to figure it out. The city attorney told me I should have waited till my second term. I don't know if I'm going to run for a second term. But this is a hard one. And because it's hard, it's going to be difficult, and we're going to have to engage with one another. And you guys are going to have to engage with each other. A couple of introductions. We have Kurt Schroeder, who is, what is your official? I know he's with Parks.
Park Maintenance and Operations Manager.
He's our Parks Maintenance and Operation Manager. We have his employee, Eric, what's your last name, Eric?
Becker.
Becker. He is the SIMD administrator. And he's going to be the one who's going to tell you what's going on with this, right? Okay, so let's hear it for Eric. Thank you.
Thank you, Geislinger. I am happy to be here to present what I would call a very high-level overview of an SIMD, Briargate SIMD. We have 7 different SIMDs within the city of Colorado Springs. Briargate is one of them. So let me, just by a show of hands, start out with, how many of you knew that you were in a Briargate SIMD? Most of the people in here, I know a lot of folks don't realize that they pay into a Briargate SIMD fund. So I'm going to kind of give you some background a little bit on where we started with the SIMD, give you an idea of what the SIMD does, and then I'll kind of frame some of the challenges within the SIMD as we go along. So again, high level. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail. So as I mentioned, there are 7 special districts, improvement districts within the city of Colorado Springs. The big 3 are really up top here. We got the Briargate, we got Norwood and Stetson Hills. The other 4 are small. We've got Platte Avenue down here, got Colorado Gateway here, Old Colorado City, and then there's a real small one off of Woodman Road called Woodstone. So what is Special Improvement Maintenance District? It's created by city ordinance, and it's got a citizen advisory board that helps oversee the budget, makes recommendations for improvements and changes. They also speak to city council on their behalf as well. As Councilman Geislinger said, Dick DeBose is the chair of that board and has been there for a long time, so he's got a lot of history. He's seen a lot of evolution over the last 20 years. So what is funding mechanism? So the ordinance allows for the assessment of a mill levy on properties within that district. That map that you had, everybody within that boundary is assessed, again, a mill on their property that pays into this district for the maintenance of operations within that district, for medians, right-of-ways, some open space areas. So Briargate SIMD specifically, created in 1983. The current mill is 4.4, so if you look on your property tax statement, that would be your mill that's on there. And our total revenues this year in 2018 is $930,000. So specifically, some of the maintenance operations and responsibilities differ a little bit from some of the SIMDs to the other, but there's a list of the things that we do within the Briargate that's written into the ordinance that we take care of. Again, medians and right-of-ways, as you think about Research Boulevard, you know, the medians and right-of-ways all along there, probably in your neighborhood. I've got a map that will show some more of that detail. Irrigation is a big part of what we do, maintaining, managing irrigation for the bluegrass areas. We do snow removal. And again, some other things. It's the only SIMD that has a park, Meadow Ridge Park, if any of you are familiar with that. And then we, meaning Parks, Recs, and Cultural Services, are the ones that administer the maintenance. So we do this through our staff. We've got a seasonal staff. We also have 3 full-time staff that's allocated straight to Briargate. Seasonal staff will vary anywhere from just a couple up to about 10 technicians throughout the year. So this is a picture of the boundaries, and again, this is the general boundary. It's not the legal binding boundary. If you look at the red mark, so out on the eastern side you have Powers Boulevard. On the north side you have Briargate Parkway. On the west side, it's kind of Chapel Hills. It's right out here. And then on the south end, you have Woodman. It's kind of the general boundary. And then you have this little piece of something up here that was added in. So as Councilman Geislinger said, you have this interesting phenomena that's happened in the development of this special improvement district. So the way the ordinance was outlined, that they would add developments as they went on. As these developments were initiated and built out, they were going to add them into this special improvement maintenance district, unlike the other three. So what's happened is you have this development, say here, after it was built out, they were put into the SIMD ordinance. And then when they got all done, they realized that there was, I shouldn't say they, others managing these properties realized that there was pieces of the pie that were left out, so to speak, or the puzzle that were left out. So you end up with this spattering of areas that aren't officially assessed this mill that pays into this district. Unlike Norwood. Norwood and Stetson were formulated after Briargate. This was kind of, Briargate was the test, so to speak. You have this clear boundary and everybody within the boundary pays in. So much clearer in terms of how this looks. Here's kind of where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. What does that all mean in dollars and cents? When you start to look at maintained area, which is really what you have to boil it down to. If you look at this first column right here, total assessed valuation, you've got Stetson Hills, Norwood, and Briargate. We'll just look at these three right now. So this is how much value that's in this area being assessed, this mill. So when you look at Stetson, you look at Norwood, 174, and you look at Briargate, 188. But then you come over here to look at really the irrigated area is kind of the big thing that we need to look at, because that's the most intensive type maintenance. That's when you have to figure out the irrigation to water this and continuous mowing and all that. So Briargate's over half or twice as much as Norwood, but yet when you look at the revenues for Norwood, it's almost as much as Briargate. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, we're about 50% of Norwood in terms of having funds to maintain Briargate, but yet we have almost twice as much area essentially to maintain, to kind of just dub it down. As we mentioned, there's these holes, these areas within the SIMD boundary that are not paying in. So this next two columns I added in with some help of the El Paso County Assessor's Office. So currently there's 7,600 parcels that are paying in, that purple shaded part of the map that you have. We have about 2,250 parcels that aren't paying in. Okay, when you look at the assessed value of those parcels, okay, it's $45 million. When you translate that out, that would add up another $200,000 or so, $201,000 that would be added into the budget operations or the revenues, total revenues for the Briargate SIMD. So just to throw that out there, it's important information to know that number, and that's what's that. All right, so here's your property tax statement, a property tax statement that, again, in my dealings and interactions with folks in these districts, a lot of them don't realize that they actually pay into this district. And how much do we pay in? Well, if you look at your property tax statement, what does that equate to? So it's about $70. It averages between $70 and $120 depending on the value of your property. This particular one's $70. When you look at it as a whole, it's about 5% of your total property taxes that is going into this maintenance fund for this district. So here lies the problem. So when you look at the revenues for Briargate, you look at the escalating costs that are associated with ongoing maintenance. None other than one I've been closely connected to for a number of years is the rising prices of water and managing irrigation water. So here's an 11-year history of water pricing, and not throwing Colorado Springs Utilities under the bus. That's,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. Anyway, here's the cost of water over the last 11 years. It's gone up 124% in 11 years. So when we look at our itemized budget for Briargate, by and large, next to salaries, water is the highest. We have about a $350,000 line item this year for water and a $930,000 budget. So, and that's reduced by a lot because of some cuts we've had to make. So water costs are a huge portion of our budget. Escalating costs have gone up significantly over the last several years, but our budget has remained pretty much static. I mean, it hasn't done much in 10 years, really, when I looked at it. So, all right, so here's some of the expenses that have been reduced. This is where we had to make decisions along with our board and said, what do we need to do to make this thing try to work? And here's some of the cuts that we've had to make with staff, water reduction, fertilizer, seed, herbicide, things that you're noticing out there in terms of maintenance getting done. This is some of the cuts that we've had to make. So what do? Again, high level, we're just going to throw out things. So maintain status quo. This is what we've done for, significantly the last 6 years, but we've really had to tighten the belt, made cuts, continued to limp along is one option. And then here's the next option is one that we've mentioned, including some of the folks that aren't, or all the folks, hopefully, that aren't paying in. Some of the properties that are in there, that number I showed you on a previous slide, to get them to pay in. Not easy. Increase the mill levy. Okay, that's another option. This has been looked at previously, I believe, but when you look at bumping up the mill, 4.4 to 5, that equates to about a $10 increase in your property taxes.
And just to say, by the originating documents, 5 mills is the maximum that can be done. So we cannot increase beyond 5 mills.
That shoots my next slide. 6 mills. If we were to go to 6, hypothetically speaking, that would equate to about a $25 increase in your property tax. So that's raising the mill is one option. So again, these are challenging. These all have their challenges in terms of trying to execute something like this. Just throwing out some ideas now, and we'll save questions, I think, till.
Yeah, I just want to follow up with a couple more, and then most of this is going to be questions. So if you can just hold on, write them down. Thank you, Eric. And that is a 30,000-foot view. I have been in the weeds with the city attorney. We're still in the weeds. I was an attorney, so I'm comfortable in the weeds with another attorney. There's lots of variations on these kinds of options, okay? And another option that needs to be put on the table is to just get rid of the SIMD entirely. One is to replace it with something else that includes both the holes in the Swiss cheese and the people that are part of the cheese right now. The other is to just limp along. One of the things that Eric didn't really talk about is part of the expenses of an SIMD is replacements, improving the infrastructure, the sprinkler systems and the like. All that has been deferred in this SIMD. Those are things that need to be addressed as we move forward. And so what I would just say is this is really just kind of a, let's talk about what the options are. They do run from just getting rid of the SIMD. The city attorney and I and Parks and Public Works are all discussing what that would look like. A lot of it would be that the maintenance of at least some of the public areas now by city code would revert to the adjacent homeowner. And so where that would be, where that wouldn't be, we need to look at that as we go forward. So with all that said, I know that's a ton of information. It's a ton of stuff. You didn't even know what an SIMD was. Now that you do, are there any questions? Or I guess, Kirk, did we miss anything? And Dick, what did we miss?
Take a minute and explain the process to getting those people who are not paying to get them to pay.
Thank you. And I was thinking about that, and I totally glossed over it. Anything we do to include getting rid of the SIMD is going to take a special election of the people within the SIMD, okay? So we are looking at a ballot issue coming down the pike. That's why I really don't think we're going to get anything done by December, all right? At the risk of making this oversimplistic, who the voters are going to be depends on what that question is going to be. And the city attorney, despite working with me for a year, we're still struggling with what that's going to look like. Is it going to be just the folks in the yellow opting in? Is it going to be just the folks in the blue opting out? Is it going to be everybody? And I told you, I do not have a vested interest. I don't. My own personal assessment is that if we can get the buy-in from everybody within that geographic boundary to replace the SIMD with something else or to enact a new financing mechanism, what we would end up doing on City Council, because City Council is the administrator by statute. We administer the SIMD. What we would do is we would set the mill in the SIMD at 0. It would still be there. It just wouldn't be, there'd be no SIMD, and that would be replaced by something else. I think that's my wonderful predecessor. Is that Larry? Hi. Wonderful guy. He's your former representative on City Council. So anyway, that's what we're dealing with, okay? And so we are looking down the road. It's time to do something about it. And what we need to do is we need to try to come up with what do you, as a collective group, what do you want to be the ballot question? And ultimately, it will be a ballot question or more. Yes, ma'am.
How long does have the 2,250 parcels that are not currently being taxed? How long have they been in that system? How long? Since 1982?
The question is, how long has there been this Swiss cheese, the 2,200 parcels out and the others in? Now, I want you to think about something. When you bought the house, whenever it was that you bought the house, some people buy the house, I'm going to even go so far, most people buy the house not knowing that they are in an SIMD. The people who bought the houses for the 2,200, they didn't know that they were being excluded from something. That's one of the reasons why I think we have to be avoiding putting the picture in. Those folks have been excluded from the SIMD since their development was done. So whoever the builders were that came into those particular developments, for whatever reason, they didn't include it, the city didn't include it, they were missed. So since those houses have been done, they've been excluded from the assessment. And legally, because they bought the house, it's a property right, we can't just go back and say, now you're automatically in. That is illegal to do.
Do we have anybody here that's in the yellow?
Okay, what we're going to do is have Councilman and Eric probably stand up here to answer the questions, and I'm going to come around. I'm going to start on this side and then move my way over, so please raise your hands.
Eric, do you want to come on?
You wanted to make a comment, though.
Do we have anybody here that's in the non-paying residence?
Do we have anybody here that's in the non-paying
I can't
area?
read the map,
So
so
not sure on the
where I'm
map.
at.
Okay.
job.
We'll put the map back up on the screen,
We
maybe.
don't have a representation.
I know it's hard to say.
It's hard
But
to
it-
read, and we'll try to get that out in an email probably to you guys.
If you guys want to come on up and look, you can. You can read the streets a little bit better.
Maybe we can do that at the end. But let's go ahead with questions. Raise your hand nice and high again. I'm going to make my way across the room here, and I'll try to catch everybody.
So we've been in our home since 1994, and we knew we were in the SMID. I read the paper every day. I read the Woodman edition. Why have I never heard anything about this until today? 24 years from the day we bought our home. Why is this a big surprise?
Well, I will tell you, it was a big surprise 24 days into me being on council. And really, it emerged as an issue probably in the last 5 to 6 years. It was maintaining itself. It was in the background. Nobody really saw what was coming up. And as I understand it, it's been in the last 5 or 6 years that people have started to say, whoa, there's a problem here. And then you've got to look at what's going on with it. I don't know the answer. I, again, would take the position to say, this is where we are today. Let's go from where we are today and see what we can do about it.
So SMIDs have been a creative way for the city to make homeowners pay for the development that builders came in. Are we creating pockets of poverty within our city since there's only 7 or so SMIDs? What happens to the parks and the properties and the maintenance outside of those?
SIMDs are a creature of statute, so the legislature created it, and then in the mid-90s they changed it, so there's all sorts of different funding mechanisms now.
And the TIFs and PIFs
And so that's one of the reasons why I said to address it by replacing it with something else.
it's still a transfer of the tax.
What people who buy into it, the theory is people who buy into the fact that this is something that they have control over. It's a way of maintaining local control. I'm not going to defend, and I'm not going to debate whether we should or should not do that. Again, it's where we are at, where this SIMD is at, and what are we going to do about this SIMD with these issues.
Raise your hands.
I've lived in my house since 1984, and over the last 2 years, my area has gotten really ragged. And so I'm kind of thinking I'm in no man's land. My concern not only is the fact that the area is getting bad. I know somewhere along the line I voted for a sales tax in that area that was supposed to help pay for some of the maintenance in Briargate. I don't know what happened to that minute sales tax. But anyhow, my concern is safety. I walk my dog, I have tree branches falling on my head. I have tree limbs that are hanging over that are dead. I have shrubs that are dying and sidewalks that need to be repaired. I need to know if I'm in that area of no man's land, then yeah, you want to talk about a third world country? That's what it's starting to look like, and I'm very disappointed. And who do I go to find out where I can get help for these things?
And I would say that's what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to get to the point where we can maintain this the way it's supposed to be maintained. And we haven't been able to do that.
So when the trees started dying on research, I found out I was in an SMID. I've been in my house since 1983. And I found out today that I am actually in the yellow. So my question is, if you incorporated the yellow portions, it still doesn't seem like very much money to be able to maintain and update what you need to do. You know, it just doesn't seem like enough. And then another thing, I live with a very strong HOA, and the city, for some unknown reason, was maintaining the property on research So we deeded it to the city, and then they stopped maintaining it, which is crazy.
And then Windjam.
Windjam.
Right in the middle. Thousands of homes.
And I think that echoes the frustration that we all should feel about this. It should be the frustration, and we need to address it. Now, in terms of the money, one of the things that I've tasked Eric and his superior to do, I know it's Kurt, but is to look at, if we do bring those others in at the same mill, it will generate more, and we think that we're hopeful that would be enough to maintain going forward. There's a big difference between what we have, trying to maintain that big deal, and then getting the rest of the people to contribute who are supposed to contribute.
Okay, let's try to keep it to some questions. We've heard about some concerns on maintenance and upkeep, so what questions?
Is there a way to get some information regarding exactly what it is that you're doing? In other words, and where those places are that you're doing, quote, snow removal, which I have yet to see anywhere in my neighborhood, besides us shoveling. So I'd like to know where these areas are that you're maintaining, and how much, and where it is that you've cut back. So I've seen no information about exactly where these are and what it is, so that I would get a sense if you just stop this whole thing, who would be impacted, and where would those impacts be? Is there any way to get that information?
I know there is a map that shows that, and I'm not sure if it's up here or not. In essence, the green areas without, is that right, Kurt?
That's Norwood.
But there you go. So that green area, and the snow removal is on the walkways.
The main walkways.
The main walkways.
The major thoroughfares. I mean, we have maps. I'm happy to send maps out to anyone who would like to see the specific areas that are main.
Take the microphone. Yeah, go ahead. What Eric was saying is we do have all this on maps. We're trying to present this as but all that stuff is on maps, and we can send that out to you if you like to see it.
Yes.
So we do have all that map area of the area that is maintained, and here in essence, if you look at the green areas, that reflects in essence the area that we're talking about.
So I believe in moving forward. You talked about, starting from here. We still got to look backwards a little bit. I think you spoke of, we've been talking about this for 5 years, and now you want to take another 15, 17 months to figure out something. I think that's too long. What takes so long to figure out, if you've been looking at it for 5 years, or council has, or city has, what's taking so long to add another 12, 15 months in the process?
Well, first of all, I scheduled a town hall on this issue a year ago, and we had 3 people show up. And we were putting the notification out. However, it didn't get distributed. Ted has been hired since last year in order to get the word out. I think he did an awesome job, and so that's part of the issue. The other thing that I was talking about is ultimately we are looking at an election. And an election, by the way, is going to cost well over $100,000. Part of it's going to be if there's other issues on the election. If it's a single issue, it's going to be more expensive than if other entities are paying to have the election run. So that's really what it boils down to. Is we have to identify what does the community as a whole want to have done. Then it's a question of putting that on a ballot, having the election, and then implementing whatever the electorate decides. That's why it's taking so long from here to the next step.
I've been in Briargate in the by the Somerset neighborhood. since '93. It was a new build by Classic, and they had all the responsibility that you're talking about now, and then they turned it over to the SMID. I called the city maintenance to find out why our streets were graded and not repaved for over almost 10 years now. And potholes and grading, and it hasn't been done. Is the city responsible for that? I didn't see it listed.
That is not a question of the SIMD. Now, if you want to send me an email, I will get that to Corey Farkas and have Corey Farkas address the street issue. That's a different issue.
That's fine. That's what brought me here when I didn't see it listed. I thought
so streets are separate. This is not included with the streets. But thank you.
So I have a question on the adjacency you talked about. When I was in Michigan, I backed up to kind of a research road, and they replaced the sidewalk, and they sent all the homeowners a bill for their portion of the sidewalk. Is that what you're saying?
I'm going to be a little hesitant, and it's truly not meant to be evasive. And this actually goes back to the question about why it takes so long. It's because the city attorney and I have been working on this. So you've got 2 attorneys working with me on this. And they're still trying to figure out legally how to extricate ourselves from what we're going to do next. And that also addresses to your question, is the city attorneys and I, Public Works and Parks, are still trying to figure out what adjacency will revert to the responsibility of the homeowner and what will revert to the city. And it essentially is, there are adjacent areas of property throughout the city. For instance, I have a home that has a ribbon of grass in front of it and a tree in front of it. That doesn't belong to me, that belongs to the city. But it's adjacent to me, so it is my responsibility by code to maintain it. And so that's the kind of adjacent maintenance that is part of this.
Hi, Councilor Geislinger. This is Margot Baker. My house isn't shown as yellow, so I kind of feel left out. Can I still talk?
Well, actually, you're not.
Do you have a highlighter?
What I would say, thank you for saying, what is happening with you, and again, you're the perfect example of why we don't point fingers, okay?
Oh.
It is the folks in yellow get the benefit of the maintenance district without contributing anything to the maintenance district.
Oh, I pay. I've got my tax thing here.
Then you're not in the yellow.
What?
Then you're not in the yellow. If you pay, you are not in the yellow.
Okay. So I'm good.
Yes.
So my question, and I've been here a long time, and when I moved into the area, District 20 was blooming, everything, you know, we had HOAs. I mean, it was the place to be in the city. And I mean, I'm looking at this now and just going, you know, why do we want to, I think I pay like $800 a year into District 20 and like 60 into this. But I guess I'm looking at what are your goals? I mean, do you have an idea for, you know, xeriscaping? I mean, if we were to continue this and get more money in?
I'm going to give that to Eric about what the visions are, okay?
Oh, vision, okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, even as we've gone on, I mean, our vision is to not necessarily continue what's in place. I mean, there's a lot of areas in Briargate that shouldn't be bluegrass. I mean, there's just very narrow areas, areas along, you know, like Research Boulevard at one time was put in as bluegrass, you know, very passive use. You're driving by 55 miles an hour, so we've actually started the process already of trying to convert some of these areas to what we'd consider a lower maintenance native grass. Now, it's something I've worked with for a number of years, and it can be done very well if you have a little bit of money to be able to transfer and change out some of these areas. So I think it would be thoughtfully with the board and to look at some of these areas, the entryways that into some of these developments that should be bluegrass and be watered at a, you know, maintained at a high level and look nice with flowers and all that, but some of the more passive use areas, you know, still maintain well, but require less maintenance. I mean, native grass can be mowed, you know, twice a month versus every week. that saves a considerable amount of maintenance costs and watered at half the rate that bluegrass is and still look nice. So that would be the vision, I believe, going forward for these areas, and talking with the board, I think they would, emulate that.
Just to clarify, and I want to clarify something. The board right now is Dick Dubois, and there's one other on the board, one other person.
New person.
Two other people. They have been trying to get people involved on a one-to-one basis for a long time. When we're talking about the board for the SIMD or anything that is replaced, while the city council administers the administration of the SIMD or its replacement, the board is selected by you all. So the vision is the vision that you guys want as reflected in the people that you will select to run the board. Does that make sense? So the vision is not just what Eric, I mean, city staff will tell you this is what we can do, we think this will look really good and whatever, but the vision is yours. And what do you guys want?
Okay, my house sides to Lexington.
Okay.
I'm up at Hammermesh Drive, so I'm the only house on Lexington and Hammermesh. A couple things have happened. I'll be going to work early in the morning, and you'll have a sprinkler that's shooting water in the air, and I'll call it in, but it doesn't seem to ever get fixed. And I think when they come look at it, they need to look at it when they're actually watering. And that way they can identify the bad ones and fix them. That's one. Two, we have that grass that runs along Lexington. Looks good when it's maintained. However, I guess 6, 7, 8 years ago, a grass fungus got brought through all of Briargate and it obliterated my yard. So I would be in favor of not maintaining grass and putting in a xeriscape there just to mitigate those types of problems. And I understand the carved out pockets, like one of the biggest ones is up by the park at the top, but that is a undeveloped, not really park, but undeveloped field that will never be developed. So,
but that's not the one that shows the carved out pockets.
No, it is in there as bright yellow.
Yes, it is.
That one up at the top is a...
That one on the top, you're right, that's a Preble's mouse habitat.
It is.
You are correct about that.
So
but
that's
it's the ones, but the 2,250 residences that are excluded.
No, I understand, but that's a little deceiving when you look at that. That should probably be a different color.
Okay, and not meant to mislead at all. The numbers are what the numbers are.
Sure, I understand, but...
Thank you.
But by showing that, it would be a little more representative.
Okay.
What do you propose to do to stop the deterioration of these common areas between now and an election of resolution? We have a beautiful new park up there, Venezia Park, and to get to it on the sidewalk, you're walking through a briar patch or a snake pit or something. It's very unpleasant to get to that park on foot.
Yeah. No, I appreciate your concern. I've been in my position since March, so we're looking at a lot of options. We got some new staff. We're getting our feet under us, so we're kind of learning some things as we go. But I'm optimistic that we'll be able to meet some of these maintenance standards that you're looking for. I really do. I mean, we're limited by budget, as we've talked about. That's why we're here. I can't promise, things. Our staff has been cut. Our seasonal staff's been cut. That's the ones that go out there, boots on the ground, getting the work done. So hard to make promises, but we're still learning some things as we go along to what level of maintenance we're going to be able to maintain it with our current revenues.
Thank you very much for the opportunity of speaking. I wanted to thank city staff, though, because the scales have fallen from my eyes. I once was blind, but now I see. As I drive down Briargate Boulevard, and I see nice grass on the north side of Briargate, and trees, and then I get to weed patches, as this gentleman mentioned. Now I understand why that is, because part of that neighborhood adjacent to the place where they have the Wiener Dog Rodeo is one of those yellow areas.
And that's a little, the other complicating factor to this is HOAs.
Quite so.
Is which HOAs are maintaining what versus which HOAs are not. That's not something that we're here to talk about.
That is quite correct, and in particular on the one with the Wiener Dog Rodeo, that HOA has evaporated and gone the way of the dodo bird because there was no activity with the architectural committee in the 10 years that it was founded, and it was written so that if nothing happened, the HOA would evaporate. Here is my question. Who are the people on the board?
Right now, it's Dick Dubas. Do we have the other two members here, Dick, tonight? Pardon?
David Rice.
Is David here?
I'm sorry, what was the last name on that one, please?
David Rice.
And Margaret, she's been on the board 2 weeks.
And Margaret has been on the board 2 weeks. That's why I didn't know that there were 3 people. One of the things, and I will say this, in those first 24 days, when Dick came to see me, he said we need more people to get on the board. And he's been trying to get people on the board for a while. And part of that is, folks, you didn't know what this was all about. And so getting interest, we need to get people on the board. He's been on it for 20 years. Can I share the letter? As a matter of city council policy, we just changed the policy that citizen-appointed boards can serve no more than 2 consecutive 4-year terms. And so Dick got a letter that I didn't know about that said, since you've been on for 20 years, thank you so much, you can't come back on again. So we do need to have new blood on the board to deal with this. But Dick said he would help tremendously. I will twist Merv Bennett's arm and Dick's arm if we have to have somebody go for a little bit longer. But I think we can have the transition now that we've got a really good interest, at least folks who appear to be interested.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'll just mention, for those that haven't heard of Kono, you can sign up for our newsletter, and we do post volunteer opportunities to volunteer on boards and commissions to make sure that your input is heard through that channel. And also, while I'm taking a break really quick, I want to introduce, we have another councilman that joined us. He was being sneaky. Bill Murray is here, so thank you, Bill, for joining.
Bill is here as a concerned constituent member of your SNI.
But we'll keep going with questions. I'll catch this guy, and then I'll come back up here on the other side.
So you said that you're short of staff to do some of these maintenance programs. Is there a possibility of having a volunteer cadre, or is that an insurance issue?
We're going to let Kurt deal with that. I don't know the answer to that.
We would welcome volunteers to assist the insurance. That's a good question as far as is an insurance issue. Yes, it limits what we may have a volunteer participate in. I think you see that.
And so what we'll do to follow up on that, and the applause for that, Ted, is we'll send out the email that you guys all gave us, the emails, and we'll send out if you're interested in doing volunteer work. Let us know and we'll hook you up with Eric.
Thank you. We just moved here from out of state, California, in October, and are very interested in making sure that our property stays of value. I have 2 questions. You've talked about the citizen board. Who do we speak to? How do we apply, or whatever, to be elected to this citizen board?
You go through, well, if you say Jacqueline Pewitt at City Hall, and her name is Jacqueline, and just say you're interested in the citizen board. and that the board you're looking at is the Briargate SIMD.
Okay. Second, I've noticed that there are a number of apartment complexes in this area, on this map. There are a lot of people living there that impact a lot of the resources, the parks and use the sidewalks and everything else. Are they being assessed, or how are they being?
The answer is, if they're in the gray, yes, they are being assessed. If they're in the yellow, no, they are not.
The complex is being assessed?
Yes.
Okay.
If they are in the area of assessment, they are being assessed. And I don't know the specific answer about what apartment complexes are or are not in there.
I have a few questions also, obviously. The projections that you put up on the board, are they based on the current participants or current participants plus everybody else that should be contributing also? In other words, all the people within our district.
Go back to the number, this projection?
Yes.
Okay, the ones above you see the word untaxed at the bottom?
Yep.
The word above that is the current. So currently, the people who are paying are generating $930,000 in revenue. The holes in the Swiss cheese encompass another 2,250 parcels that would generate another $200,000.
Does that include the increase in the levy, if that were to happen also?
That does not include the increase in levy. I'm hoping we don't have to increase levy, by the way.
Well,
one of the things we've talked about is...
My next question to you is the city contributing anything, or is it all falling on us? And if they are, how much of the total budget are they contributing?
And Kurt, correct me if I misstate this. The city maintains the city rights of way and the city property in there as part of the general fund. That's not the area that we're talking about, though. The SIMD is public areas outside of city property. The city does not own that. That's part of the SIMD property. So we have two separate property owners in there.
I would like to see those numbers. I don't believe it.
Well, we can show we'll show you the areas that we're doing that. The city is not paying, and I will say this, the city is paying nothing out of the general fund for maintenance of SIMD property.
Thanks.
Right? Okay, just a second. Kurt wants to elaborate on that.
If I may, where do I want to start? I believe, and I've been with the city 19 years, and all this occurred prior to my tenure. When I walked in, there it was. My understanding is that for Briargate, Norwood, and Stetson Hills, which are the three largest ones, the intent of the developer in the city getting together wanted to make sure that they were developing a superior public landscape for those areas, knowing that the city's pockets were only so deep and that they could not commit to a higher level of maintenance. Ergo, the SIMDs were created. Now, with that said, and what Councilmember Geislinger has been sharing, the revenues coming in from the SIMD have not kept up. Revenues also coming in from other areas to take care of other public properties as far as medians and the like haven't quite kept up either, but they're certainly doing better than those in the Briargate area. Now, with that said, if you can picture Briargate Boulevard, someone else just earlier said, so over there, that's maintained by somebody else. Correct. And I think an interesting issue that we run up against all the time, if you look at Briargate Parkway, is that the one that the DC is on? Okay, Briargate Parkway. There are no fewer than 5 different entities along that stretch that have a responsibility for maintenance. Everything from the SIMD to Pine Creek to the Briargate Business Park campus or whatever I think you're called, down close to I-25 to, I think it's La Plata on the east side going up to Powers Boulevard. And then, of course, beyond Powers Boulevard, you have another, I'm probably confusing the issue, another animal called a Metro District, which you have Cordera and Wolf Ranch and all those things, which have a whole nother taxing entity that manages their common areas, which is much better funded. If you walk over there, you can see it. So I don't know who posed the question. I'd be more than happy to talk with you more about it and get you one of my cards.
Thanks, Kurt.
I just have a quick question, and I might have missed it at the very beginning.
Can you talk just a little bit louder? I'm having trouble.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Go ahead.
I was just wondering, I may have missed this at the very beginning. The SIMD, does that also, I don't know if the sidewalks are covered by CDOT as the streets are, or is that under SIMD?
The sidewalks, other than the walkways through the, yeah, it depends on what you mean by sidewalks.
It depends, yeah, there you go, that terrible word. The sidewalks themselves, that concrete, if it's in front of your home, that's your responsibility per city ordinance. And if it cracks and you've got a tree that the roots lifted up, then that falls to the property owner, the homeowner. Along Lexington, for instance, that's in the city right away, that would fall under the city. The snow removal that Eric mentioned earlier, that's where the snow removal happens by the SIMD, which is on those major thoroughfares, not on that sidewalk in front of your home.
You know, status quo isn't working for too many people, so we're probably talking about a ballot initiative. They cost money. You mentioned a $100,000 number. Does that come from the SIMD fund that's already a little short?
You know, I asked the city attorney that question, and he said, we're investigating it. And part of, and it's not meant, I mean, there really is some very, and for those you don't know, I was a lawyer for 27 years. There's a lot of complexity. This involves a lot of complexity. It's why I said at the beginning that there's not a yes-no answer here. This is hard and harder. And so we have to deal with it. In all probability, if there is a ballot initiative referred on any of this, and it has to be referred on everything. Some of it can be less than a full-blown election. Like to get rid of the SIMD, the best guess is if we have a petition process and everybody wants to get rid of it, that can be done by petition, I believe. But other than that, it's going to cost a ton of money, and I think it's going to come from the SIMD.
So I didn't get asked a second one. Who writes this ballot initiative? SIMD board?
What's going to happen here's the way it's going to work. Is if we can get a an idea from the community, this is what we think we want, and this is how we want to do it. The ballot initiative initially will be proposed by the city attorney. The city attorney will write it, present it to you, probably to be approved by your board. At that point, whoever the board is that's elected will say, this is the ballot initiative we want to refer to the ballot. So it's not going to be that you guys have to draft it yourselves. The city attorney and the city staff will help to draft it, but it really is going to be the initiative that the members of the SIMD want to put forth.
But it can't just be added to the regular election without the added expense.
A special, if it is, then the expense is less. So every ballot initiative costs an amount of money. The amount of money it costs lessens depending on the number of issues that are being presented. And since this is unique, I mean, I can't vote on this. I'm not a member of the area, so I would not be one of the electors that would be voting on this. And so we're talking about a really limited area. We're talking about, what, 9,851 parcels of property. The owners of 9,851 and whoever the voters are in those areas.
David?
And Mr. Murray?
Well, it's really important everybody understands how this Swiss cheese piece works. In order to join the SIMD, you have to individually petition to join it. All right, does that make sense?
If you're in
not
the
paying
yellow,
the tax right now, we have to go individually to get you to join it. Now, if you're already getting the benefit, why would you join it?
And I will say, that's where we were last year when Mr. Murray was one of the 3 people who came. It's a little bit different than that now, because we really have done a year's worth of legal research on what can and cannot. That's close, but it's not entirely, fully accurate. It's close. But there's some nuances to that.
Hi. So I was looking, and it said that it maintains landscape medians, entry signs, flower beds, etc. I live in Gatehouse Village, and the flower beds there just look terrible. If I was house hunting right now, I would think, oh my gosh, I don't want to live there. And yet, other flower beds and other entryways and other medians look better maintained. So how does that work as far as like where you determine where it's better maintained and not?
Yeah, good question. So this year, at the start of this year, it was decided some of the beds wouldn't be planted. It's hard to justify annual flowers, which cost a lot of money to not just grow and buy and plant and maintain and water. If you can't maintain, the common areas to the level that they need to be, it's almost like a luxury. So it was decided this year to just plant some of the more high-profile beds, some of the more visible beds, and some of them, it was talked about at our last board meeting going forward to look at these other beds that we are planting and begin to prioritize even these, because again, it's costing a lot of money to maintain these, what I would call more of a luxury in the sense when it comes down to watering and mowing and getting the basics done.
First of all, thank you for all the savings you've done in trying to save this whole thing. I think every one of us would be motivated to solve this because it's our property values. It's our house values. People aren't going to move into our neighborhood if it looks like there's weeds and things aren't motivated. So are you telling me that as I look at this, the only answer for getting everybody included is a GID?
What I said is, in my opinion, and again, this is not as a vested person, as the person who's interested, because it's not my area. From my assessment personally, if the voters, all the voters approve the creation of a separate GID to replace the SIMD, then or in lieu of the SIMD, then what would happen is the SIMD would remain in force, but City Council would put a 0 mil on it. There'd be no assessment on that SIMD, and it would be paid by a GID. That is, that is the cleanest way legally. And the city attorney who's been working with me and I both say that is the cleanest way legally to do this, if this is what we want to do.
Okay, a minute ago, somebody threw another curveball, and that's called a petition. Petitioning people within our district that are not in the district as to whether or not they would join the district voluntarily. Is that correct? I mean, you read the petition.
No, but before 1993, this is the change. What we discovered since last year is that that's the way it was done before 1993. With the passage of Tabor in 1993, the petition process no longer works. We have to have an election for people to do that. That's why we can't petition in. There is an ability to petition out. So people in those yellow areas, if the people in those yellow areas, each of those areas wanted to have a special election, they could do that. But then you're having how many special elections is that? 7, 8, which is just ridiculous.
What is the required budget? I've not heard anyone say, I need $1.3 million to do this adequately.
Well, if you look at the numbers here, I mean, based on what I've observed so far, and again, reduced levels of, if you go back a couple slides, I think it's close to $300,000 that have been cut over the last really couple of years. The accumulation is close to $300,000. So $250,000 would get us very close. You know, $300,000 somewhere in that neighborhood.
So you need 1.25 to make it work the way you think it ought to. Is that correct?
The current expenses. Yeah, at the current level of costs, that was adequate if that was today. But you know, going forward, obviously that number will increase.
So there'll be no room for growth, one. And two, if you run the rest of these numbers, even if we include all those that are not contributing today, we're still running 100.5 short. So the whole thing sounds like it's a moot point to turn around and try and do to get everybody playing. And we need to move on beyond that, in my mind.
I would say that what I mentioned earlier and what somebody brought up back here, I mean, to me, the maintenance philosophy is going to change. We're not going to continue to do the same old thing. So to cut back on water and do some of the things that we're looking to do, we can improve the level of general maintenance everywhere. And in areas that are very passive use, reduce the level of maintenance. Does that make sense? And by doing that, you know, the whole level of the maintenance can go up everywhere.
And just, if I might, because I'm glad you got to that, Eric. One of the issues we have now is because of the budgetary shortfalls, there isn't the money to do the things that might save money down the road, which is the xeriscaping and the redesign of various areas. With the additional money, one of the things that I've talked about with these folks over the last year is that money can be invested in money-saving maintenance issues. Instead of having bluegrass, you put the native areas that don't require the watering, or the xeriscaping, or things like that. So, am I saying it in the right way?
So we also have what we call reserve funds. So when there's money left over at the end of the year for whatever reason. Last year was a wet season, relatively speaking. There was $100,000 or so that was left over. That goes back into the reserve fund. And we have money to do certain projects, like you're saying, xeriscaping projects, or if we need a piece of equipment and those types of things. So that money stays within the district, and we can allocate it for projects, capital projects, and capital equipment, and those types of things. So just to make you aware.
Some of you know me, most of you don't. My name's Lee Cool, and I was president of the Northeast Colorado Springs Neighborhood Association. Right now, it's a rather dormant association. It's a dormant association, okay, sorry, that I keep alive only for the purpose of the fact that we won the court case at the state Supreme Court against the lawsuit for $16.3 million. And has yet to be paid. I look at this thing, and Swiss cheese is probably a very beneficial term to use for this. It's in my view, it's a product of a committee. By definition, a committee is a horse. There's a camel designed by. I got it backwards. You know what I'm after.
Camel designed by.
This thing is so bollocksed up. I think that shoot the camel is about the best thing I can recommend.
And what do we do going forward? That's an option. Just get rid of the whole thing.
Well,
and we need to talk about whether that's what the community as a whole wants.
The gentleman that recommended the GIMD is probably the closest to the solution, I think.
Thank you.
That's my assessment right now. I've been involved in installation development in the military, and this is bare.
I think bollocksed is a good word.
Yeah, I live in the first housing development east of Chapel Hills Mall, right off Briargate Boulevard. And I bought the house in 1984. And my neighbor at the time did not like the way that Briargate Boulevard looked like on entering our housing development. So she wanted to do something about it. And lo and behold, she worked with somebody and we got into the SIMD. So now, along the north side of Briargate Boulevard, which a gentleman previously mentioned, we have grass and a sprinkler system and trees, really nice. But the next housing development east of us, right off Briargate Boulevard, the north side of Briargate Boulevard is weeds and rocks and looks like crap. And because they're not in the SIMD. So they are included in the SIMD. If we pull all these non-tax properties into the SIMD, should they expect their portion of the north side of Briargate Boulevard to be beautifully landscaped? And how many other common areas in these non-tax parcels, how many other common areas exist in these non-tax parcels that if they are brought in, they should expect those common areas to be improved? So if we include all these non-tax parcels, aren't we also going to have a lot more common areas to maintain?
The maintenance of the SIMD includes the area that is yellow right now. So the SIMD is maintaining those areas. Those areas simply aren't being assessed as part of the SIMD because it's been bollocks.
There's no maintenance being done on the north side of Briargate Boulevard for the development north of me because there's no trees, rocks, weeds. There's nothing to maintain. It's just
Yeah, I know exactly the area you're talking about. You make a great point. If all the rest of the holes were included, that situation really doesn't exist. That is a very unique situation when you go and you drive all these roads. There will be areas adjacent to areas that the SIMD is already maintaining within that. Geez, you're talking about right there on the edge. I know exactly where you're talking about as you come down the hill toward Chapel Hills Mall, and you can see very clearly these people opted out or weren't put in, whatever it was, a number of years ago. That's a unique situation, and that doesn't exist, to the best of my knowledge, anywhere else in the district. Now, there might be an expectation of them to say, well, I want mine to now look like that. And we'll have to cross that bridge if we get to that bridge.
Okay.
Thank you. We have about 10 minutes, so we got a couple more questions up here.
I guess my question is, since this won't happen anytime soon, and all the it's less mowing and such, what is the definition of a native grass right now? Because is it weeds or native grass forever? Then
I've got some great examples. That's been my job for the last 7 years. We have about 30 different conversions that we've done around the city that have been really good examples. Rock Rimmon, if you want to go on Woodman Road, west of I-25, Rock Rimmon Boulevard, there's some really good examples of what native grass can be. And I know that's the perception a lot of people have of native grass, but native grass can be a very nice stand of grass that requires less water, less maintenance, and still look gorgeous driving by.
yeah, could it be done before we get a ballot question? I mean, I'm just saying, is it always just going to, because I write about mowing in certain areas on the greenways, and they say, well, that's native grass in Briargate, we can only do it twice a year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's not nice native grass, but
It's not a good example at all, but we've had to designate certain areas that because of mowing requirements. Does that make sense? We just kind of use that word saying that it only gets mowed 3 times a year. That's a designation for certain areas, or 2 times a year, or some places 1 time a year. It's unirrigated, a lot of it. What I'm talking about would be irrigated and maintained, but at a lesser level. So.
And if I may, that's a great question. We don't want to weed patch. We're embarrassed in some of these areas, I gotta be honest with you. But I want to take my hat off and give props to Eric. Like you said, he's been our water conservation specialist for a number of years. He was with us, he went over the utilities, we hired him away from the utilities, and we've converted, recognizing that one of the biggest things in my budget is water, just the same as in the and when I say mine, I'm talking about for the parks, is water. And unfortunately it continues to go up. We've converted over 100 acres of our, what was 900 acres of bluegrass turf out there into something other than bluegrass turf under Eric's leadership. Dropped our costs not only for water, but also for the maintenance has to take place with mowing and all that kind of stuff. And as a result, we're reducing our costs across the entire system. And it's a vision that Eric has, he and I have talked about extensively, and we'll head in that direction. And yes, we can give you multiple examples. Look at Rock Rimmon Boulevard, or Rock Rimmon, yeah, Woodman, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. As one of the examples, it looks good. And it's irrigated, but at about 60% of what bluegrass is. It's mowed every other week? Twice a month. And you would be impressed. And that's what we're hoping to go toward with, as he laid out at the main entryways. Hey, let's have some beautiful bluegrass and be able to put in our annual flowers like we used to, and really create a memorable landscape that's going to be something we all can be proud of.
Okay, you have all of our emails. We don't have any of yours. I mean, you've given names, I don't know how to spell names. Is there a way we can get a list of emails for the people?
I have a few cards. I'd be glad to give you one. But I am District 2. You guys are all District 2. This is Bill Murray. He's at large. And you can get in touch with us at City Hall anytime. I will give you a card when I'm done tonight.
But I'd like, like Dick's email or, something so,
okay.
This shouldn't stop here.
It's not going to stop.
And be one direction after this.
This is to start here. Go ahead.
Hi. I just want to say I used to work for the city, and I can appreciate the budget constraints you guys work under. I've been a resident in Briargate for 30 years, was in Windjammer, the excluded area for a while, now in a pay area. The question I have is about La Plata, and I know they're kind of one of the big kahuna developers that took over Briargate, I think from Benicia, right? And La Plata had a lot of responsibility for common space developments, for common space maintenance. How does that area that they're responsible for, is it completely separate from this SIMD, or does it overlap? Because they have, all the maintenance that La Plata does. Is that separate property from this, or is it separate?
Kurt is saying it's separate. I'm not sure if there's any more information.
Yeah, it would be separate. And when you look at, and I brought this up a little earlier, if I'm getting my properties right, Cordera, for instance, La Plata, that's a La Plata development, I believe.
Well, Cordera is on the other side of Powers.
Right, on the other side of Powers. They have their own metro district, which is a vehicle of the state, how it's created. So it has its own taxing district. Let's hope that it is better funded than our SIMDs. I would suspect that it is. So yes, it's a patchwork of responsibilities depending on what part of the community that you're in. And there's a lot of metro districts that are being brought into play through City Council and our planning department to create that vehicle by which not everybody has to go back and lean on the city for their landscape maintenance support.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your time this evening. The main hesitancy to include all the voters in the SIMD, is that primarily the immediate increase in their tax? If that's the case, is there a way to incrementally increase it over a 5-year period? And then second question, if we start from scratch, is what you're advocating, I'm hearing, are we looking at a comparable tax rate?
But just to try to clarify, and it's complicated, we've been wrestling with it. The city attorney came to me right after the council meeting today with some more information, some more insights in this. The only way that, the SIMD as it exists now, because of the rights of property, when people buy property and they are or are not subject to the SIMD assessment, that runs with the property. So since somebody buys a house in one of those yellow areas, that person has a property right not to pay the SIMD assessment. And those voters in each of those pockets, an option is to have those voters in each of those pockets as a defined electorate choose to vote in or out, to opt in or out of the current SIMD. That would entail lots and lots of elections, and the expenses would be through the roof because we're going to have multiple elections. That's why I don't think that that's a good approach. To me, I think that, because let's face it, one of the things that I should have said, there's an equity question to this, right? There is truly an equity question to this. People should not be forced to pay for something when what they are paying for is being is not coming to their benefit because it's being diluted from people who aren't paying through no fault of either. Okay. I think for me personally, I think the cleanest way is to have a vote of the entire district geographically. That's the American cheese, right? To say, we want this, which is a GID, or a BID. And that then becomes the funding mechanism for this going forward. To me, that seems to me, and the city attorney has said the same thing, they think that's probably the best way.
Okay, wait, we've got one up front, one over here, and we might have to break. I'll let the council in, because we can do some networking at the end.
Yeah, I'll stick around for a little bit afterwards. I haven't had my breakfast yet, okay?
Let's take these last two questions.
Take the last two questions. I want to finish up with one thing, and then, okay.
Thank you. We have a wall behind our house against Research Parkway that's cracking. Is that it seems to me that would be more of a priority than mowing. But I was told by the city to contact John Carlson, and I've been emailing and emailing, and I've never heard a peep back.
I can tell you Mr. Carlson has been replaced by Eric over here.
Oh, so I need to
so he is truly ignoring you since he retired.
And remember, I just heard, I talked to Ted, he'll be sending an email to all of you with these gentlemen's contact information included in the email. So don't worry, you'll have that information. So
tell Mr. Carlson to get back to you, please.
Sir, we talked about probably 3 different avenues to approach this, and you highlighted the GMD is probably the best option, but that's almost 10,000 people, 9,851 people. What the media, how are you going to reach all these people to get them to vote, explain exactly what are they going to get from this, whatever.
Thank you for asking that question, because that goes exactly to the segue that I was going to say is the last thing. This starts the conversation. There are extra handouts over there. Get your neighbors involved. Tell them how important this is, because it is important. I've talked to the real estate professionals in Colorado Springs. I'm going to hope to have somebody from the real estate come here and talk about the benefit of making sure that this gets done. I heard several of you talking about maintaining your property value, being able to sell your houses when it's time to sell, and to do all this stuff. These are things that need to get addressed. And so what I'm hoping to do is to continue this. We're going to have another meeting sometime soon. And we're going to have, hopefully, that's what I'm saying, now that this beats the 3 people who showed up last year tremendously. And so spread the word, talk to them about getting engaged. I want to have 2 or 3, however many meetings we have to, to sit down to really flesh out what the options are and what are the options that we want in this community. If the community, I'm talking about the SIMD, the SIMD community wants to get rid of the SIMD, that is the choice of that community. I don't think it's a good one, but that's me on the outside looking in. If you want to try to have these little pockets vote to get in, that is something that we can look at and look at those areas. But it really is from here going forward, looking at these options, and there's variations between these options as well that we can look at. And so it's to identify what is the option that this SIMD wants to look at going forward. And then we decide, okay, if that's what you want to do, then we're going to have that election. When we're going to have it, elections, didn't Mark say that an election on an SIMD has to be like a special? I think it has to be an April election. It has to be one of the things that the guy who asked why it's so long, I recall the city attorney saying that because of the nature of the election, it has to be off of a November election. So it's got to be an April election. So we're looking at April of 2019 for the election, if we can get things done between now and then.
I think Eric has some final remarks too before we wrap up.
Yeah, thank you for coming out tonight. I would just say that we do have 2 seats open on our advisory board. I've heard some interest tonight just with folks that would potentially like to help serve on the board. So, go ahead and follow up with that. I can share more about that if you're interested afterwards. You can come see me. Another idea that we talked about volunteers. We have a volunteer flower program that we run here in the city where a group of folks will volunteer to sponsor and maintain a flower bed throughout the year. So that's something we might look at as well going forward, to get people involved to sponsor a flower bed in your neighborhood and maintain those. We would put them in and water them, and then you kind of would do the maintenance on those flower beds. So again, thanks for coming out.
And I want to thank you guys for coming out. I want to thank Eric and Kurt from the city. I want to thank Sarah from Kona. I want to thank Ted for his help. And give kudos to this man right here. Dick has kept this issue alive for years, and we finally came to him. And thank you very much for what you've done. And well done. I'll stick around and answer any questions you guys have. Meet your neighbors.